So what if I told you that the huge, complex decisions of a massive corporation and the day-to-day choices of a small local farm are actually driven by the exact same two golden rules? Today, we're going to break down the simple, powerful logic that guides how pretty much any competitive business decides what to do.
To really get to the bottom of this, let's use a classic example you'll find in just about any economics textbook: a farm. So picture a simple, competitive corn farm. Every single year, it's got to answer a really basic question. How much corn should we actually grow? Is it 10,000 bushels, 20,000? How in the world do they land on a specific number? Well, the way our farm answers that one question, that reveals the two golden rules of maximizing profit. And what's so cool about this is that the logic doesn't just work for farms. It's the same for video game companies, for coffee shops, for car manufacturers, you name it. Any company trying to make it in a competitive market.
Okay, so before we can get to the rules, we have to understand the game. What is any business trying to do, and what's holding it back?
First things first, let's get our terms straight. At its absolute core, a firm is all about production. That's just the economist's way of saying turning inputs, like labor, seeds, machinery, into outputs, the stuff they sell. For our farm, it's turning things like fertilizer and work into bushels of corn. Simple as that.
And this right here, this lays out the central drama of every single business. On one side, you've got a super simple goal: make as most profit as possible, revenue minus cost. But on the other side, firms are kind of boxed in. They're stuck with the technology they have, what's actually possible to make, and by the markets, what they have to pay for their supplies, and the price they can get for their final product. And it's in this tension where all the interesting decisions have to be made.
So, facing that tension, a company has to answer two big questions. And the first one is all about output. It's looking at the final product and asking, exactly how much of this should we make to get the most profit?
Now, to answer that, we need a really crucial concept: marginal cost. Forget about total costs or average costs for a second. Marginal cost is all about thinking on the edge, or at the margin. It asks a very, very specific question. What is the extra cost of making just one more? So think about it like this. If our farm has already grown 10,000 bushels of corn, the marginal cost isn't the average cost of all of them. Nope, it's the specific cost of producing that 10,001st bushel. It's that single extra unit that guides the whole decision. All right, so now we can ask our big question in a much smarter way. With this idea of marginal cost in our pocket bucket, at what exact point does it make sense for our farm to say, okay, that's it, we're done, no more corn?
The answer to that question is our first golden rule. We'll call it the golden rule of supply, and it tells a company exactly how much it should be willing to make and sell for any given price.
And here it is. Just think it through. As long as the price you get for one more bushel of corn is higher than the cost to produce that specific bushel, you're making a profit on it. So you should totally make it. And you keep doing that bushel after bushel until you hit the point where the cost to make that one extra bushel is exactly equal to the price you can sell it for. That is the sweet spot. That's the stopping point. Go any further, and you'd actually start losing money on each new bushel. So there's our rule: produce until price equals marginal cost.
Okay, so that's one side of the coin, the output decision. But we can look at the very same problem from a totally different angle, the input decision. Instead of asking how much to produce, we can ask how many resources should we use? And for our farm, that basically means how many workers should we hire?
And just like we had marginal cost, on the input side, we have something called marginal product. This is just the extra output you get from adding one more unit of input. So if you hire one more person, how many extra bushels of corn do you get because of them? Now, it's really important to remember this usually follows a pattern of diminishing returns. The first worker might add a ton, but the 100th worker on the same plot of land is probably going to add a lot less. So how does a company use this? Well, they've got to turn that extra product into a dollar amount. Let's say the farmer hires one more worker, and that person's marginal product is 10 extra bushels of corn. If corn is selling for $5 a bushel, you just multiply them. That one worker generated an extra $50 of revenue. Economists have a name for this, of course: the value of the marginal product, or VMP.
And that idea, the value of the marginal product, is the key to our second golden rule. This rule is what determines a firm's demand for things like labor.
This rule is basically the twin of our first one. The logic is so simple. Why would you hire someone for a $50 wage if they only bring in $49 of value? You just wouldn't.
But you would absolutely hire them if they bring in $51. So, a company will keep hiring people as long as the value they create is more than their wage. And the stopping point? It's where the value from that next worker is exactly equal to what you have to pay them. So the rule is, hire until the wage equals the value of the marginal product.
So we've just walked through two rules that sound a little different. One's about output, the other's about input. But here's the big insight. They're not two different strategies. They're just two different ways of arriving at the exact same profit-maximizing decision.
I mean, look at this. The symmetry here is just perfect. The output rule focuses on the product. Make stuff until the money from the last one equals what it costs to make. The input rule focuses on the worker. Hire people until the money from the last person you hired equals what you paid them. So whether you're deciding to make one more thing or hire one more person, the logic is identical. Keep going until the extra benefit equals the extra cost.
Okay, so what's the big takeaway here? Let's boil it all down. First, a competitive firm doesn't get to set prices. It just takes whatever the market is offering. Given those prices, its whole strategy is about thinking at the margin. It's constantly asking, is it worth making one more, or is it worth hiring one more? And it stops right at the point where the answer flips to no, when that extra cost finally equals the extra revenue. This simple logic determines everything, both how much product it supplies to the market and how much labor it demands from the market.
And that brings us to a final, really interesting thought. These two golden rules are the absolute bedrock for understanding competitive companies. But our whole analysis was based on one massive assumption, that our little farm is a price taker, that it's too small to influence the market price. But what about a giant company, a monopoly that's so big it can set the price? How do the rules change then? Well, that's a whole other ballgame and a story for another explainer.